This morning on BRN Sunday, what could be on the retirement agenda in 2025? And here to help break it all down is Jennifer Flitton, Head of Government Affairs for Invesco. Jen, welcome back to the program. So great to see you. Thanks for joining us this morning.
Thanks so much for having me.
And we talked to you before the election. A lot has transpired since then. I want to get your reaction, and then I want to talk about maybe priorities for the new administration, the Congress, and the Senate. So first, your reaction.
Yeah, so we had a pretty definitive mandate that came out of this election with a unified government going into 2025, which means that the House is majority Republican, the Senate is majority Republican, and there's a new Republican administration. And so you're going to see in the first 100 days, the first 6 months, a real aggressive agenda on the top priority issues that Donald Trump ran on. And he's going to have pretty strong support, being that he has a unified government in Congress. So he's going to drive through on trade issues, on immigration issues, on tax issues, because we have a big sort of a tax expiration at the end of 2025. But those are going to be the main themes, as well as energy. Energy is going to be a major theme as well.
So Jen, where does, we talked to you and we're trying to look at things through the lens maybe of retirement. Does retirement fit into somewhere in those priorities as a subset, for example, of taxation or other areas? Do the things that the industry needs, and we've talked with you about collective investment trusts, some of the other things, does that fit in anywhere here in at least the first 100 days?
Yeah, so we're still waiting on some guidance, right, from the IRS, from DOL on the Secure 2.0. That's going to continue going into the end of this year, potentially some guidance, but certainly within the first part of next year. You're going to have the committees of jurisdiction still very focused on these issues, right? You can walk and chew gum at the same time in Washington, and you're going to have the Health Committee, the Senate Health Committee, with Chairman Cassidy at the helm, very much still driving some of the issues around retirement and Social Security solvency, right? Because this is a passion of his as well. And then you're going to have the Education and Workforce Committee with likely a new chairwoman or man at the top of that committee, who are also going to continue to have these conversations around retirement. Now, the House Ways and Means and Finance Committees, which are the other committees of jurisdiction, they're going to be very focused on tax next year, almost exclusively focused on tax. And sometimes retirement comes into the discussion as a pay for, right? And so we're very much focused and advocating on keeping, the tax incentives around our current retirement system intact, and being very aware of possible Rothification movements.
Yeah, and when you say Rothification, I think that means, I want to confirm, making it taxable in the current year, and therefore it would be grow tax-free over time. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's right. There's been obviously a significant move and a favorability towards Roth products and 401ks and IRAs, of course, but 401ks, and we've seen this in the catch-up contribution language in the Secure 2.0, which was also a pay for, which was delayed, and it comes into effect very soon. And so that's going to continue to play a role, and we're going to see how that's implemented by the IRS soon in their guidance. And then I think Congress will be watching how that's implemented to see if they can move forward even further on some of that IRA, Roth sort of product and 401k.
And Jen, one of the first things I think that needs to happen, again, I'm not the expert, but we've got some new cabinet level positions, or the cabinet members need to be put in place, new Treasury, new Department of Labor, SEC. Does that frame or shape retirement and or the capital markets?
Well, the Department of Labor secretary is Chavez DeRemer, and she is right now sort of controversial because of her stance on labor issues. I think she's going to be very labor focused. I'm more focused on the EBSA that's sort of that undersecretary, but she also sat on the Education and Workforce Committee. I mean, she has interest in retirement issues. She has some background and some policy knowledge of it. But I think there's so much focus right now on the labor side of things that we haven't really sussed out where she is necessarily and her interest level on our issues. But there's going to be, as there is when you have changes of administration, there's the pendulum swings, right? And so you're going to have the Department of Labor very focused on sort of undoing some of the more controversial rules, like the fiduciary, some of the ESG rules, the factors of ESG into retirement products. That's going to be a focus of this next administration, sort of pendulum swinging back. As far as Treasury, there are so many issues obviously in front of Treasury. There's also a new IRS commissioner that's been nominated, who is a current member of Congress or a former member of Congress. But there's going to be a lot of movement, right? He wants to undo a lot of what has been.
Yeah, and I want to ask you about the T word, tariffs. That's something that gets bandied about, talked about. Does that have an impact at all to what we're talking about, what we talk about as an industry in terms of retirement, savings? I would imagine in some way it does because it's economic.
Well, sure. I mean, I think that the sectors who are affected and how that relates in your overall investment portfolio, possibly. I think it's more the larger macro issues that are sector specific that I think tariffs play a certain role, but depending maybe on the commodities, perhaps some of the energy policy really loosening and creating greater extraction of our energy sources here in the United States. You could see some shift in maybe where you want to invest in portfolios, but in the retirement space, it's really going to be more of a focus on this tax reconciliation that's expected at some point this year. And then one position that we haven't delved into here is the new SEC chairman, and that was announced shortly ago. It's going to be Paul Atkins, who is a former SEC commissioner during the Bush administration. He is also very keyed into a lot of different industries here in Washington, and especially the crypto industry, right? So he's a consultant to the Digital Chamber. He is co-chair of the Token Alliance. He is very knowledgeable, very much a big supporter of the crypto industry. So you're going to see a complete 180 at the SEC as it relates to crypto. But he also has a deep knowledge of all areas of capital markets and securities law. And so you're going to really see sort of a pullback from enforcement. You're going to see a big deregulatory move. And areas that we're really focused on is private markets and the accredited investor definition. You're going to see a real drive to get more retail investment into the capital markets, especially since we've seen a real decrease in IPOs, and allowing retail investors to get at that ground level to see the real growth in their portfolio. So I think it's a real exciting time for the capital markets.
Jen, if I could ask you a professional question, I want to get an insight, if you could share with the audience. So we've got this transition that happens January 20th. What does someone in your role do in this in between? Is it reconnecting with colleagues on the Hill? Is it reconnecting with potential EBSA, Assistant Secretary of the Employee Benefit Security Administration? How do you spend your time getting ready for this new administration, if you don't mind sharing?
Yeah, so a lot of what we do is work with our trades as an industry, right? And industry advocacy. And the trades are going in very actively talking to the transition teams. But until you really have some of these undersecretaries and the deputy level folks, you're not really looking at, you're more looking to organize yourself right now and thinking about as an industry and looking out for our clients, what do we want? What do we want to see happening? Where are the opportunities and where are the risks? Where do we need to be on offense and where do we need to be on defense? But a lot of what we do generally day to day is connecting with staff on the Hill, right? And there's going to be a lot of new staff on the Hill. There's going to be a lot of new members and new senators. And they're going to be reorganizing and adding new members to the committees of jurisdiction where we really care about. In fact, next week is a very important meeting of the steering committee in the House where they'll decide who will be the next chairman of the Financial Services Committee. We already know Senator Tim Scott will be the chairman of the Banking Committee. But there's a lot of opportunity here when you have unified government to get moving on some bills that we really care about that we haven't been really productive with this year. And so I think there's a lot of hope for success next year on some of the issues that we really care about.
So Jen, do you track your steps to and from the Capitol and to and from the White House? I'm just curious what those.
Yeah, I have my little heart monitor on here, so I know if I've hit my 10,000 of the day.
There, I bet you get that in the first hour. Jen, we're going to have to leave it there. Great analysis as always. And look, we look forward to having you back on the program again very soon.
Thanks so much.
And don't forget to subscribe to our daily newsletter, The Morning Pulse, for all the news in one place. Details, of course, at our website. And we're back again tomorrow for another edition of BRN. Until then, I'm Jeff Snyder. Stay safe, keep on saving. Don't forget, roll with the changes.